Hey Ransom teens, Pastor Ryley here, and we are in our final week of this series called Brave. And I get to introduce you to one of our own tonight, Ryan, the resident pastor from the Ransom. He's amazing. He serves with 8th grade guys, and you guys are going to be blessed to hear tonight what it means to be brave enough to obey. So all of the weeks leading up to this, we've been talking about different areas where you can be brave in following Jesus. And tonight we're going to put it all together and tell you what it looks like going forward, obeying everything that Jesus has commanded. Before I send it to the video, I want to remind you, next week is our last week in our summer send-off. You're going to want to check out everything we're doing because it's going to be pretty awesome. More communication on that's coming to social media, the text number, everything. You'll find it. You'll want to make sure next Wednesday you find time to tune in to whatever it is we're doing. It's going to be a lot of fun. With that, without further ado, check out our 7th and final week of our series, Brave.
Hey everybody, Pastor Ryan here, and we are in the last week of our series, Brave, where we've been talking about what it looks like for us as Christians to be brave in today's society. Wherever you're tuning in from, welcome. We hope you enjoy your experience with us. If you remember the first week, Pastor Ryley talked about being brave enough to surrender. In week 2, Pastor Sean talked about being brave enough to testify. Pastor Josie taught us what it looks like to be brave enough to serve in week 3. Week 4, Pastor Zach showed us what it means to be brave enough to pray. We all kind of did our own separate thing for week 5, depending on what youth group you attend. And last week, for week 6, Pastor Jana talked about being brave enough to worship. And that leads us to this week. This week, we are wrapping this series up with brave enough to obey. Now, I'm sure when you think of the word obey, you get kind of this weird vibe from it. I know for me, when I think of obedience, I think of dog training. You want your dog to obey your commands. You want them to lay down when you say lay down. You want them to stay when you say stay, and so on. And I think for a lot of us, when we hear you need to obey, we think of ourselves as dogs who are just supposed to obey their master's commands. So I can see how you can get a weird vibe from the word obey. But by the end of this message, I hope that you will see that obedience is a beautiful and amazing word that helps show the relationship between God and His people. We're going to be in Daniel chapter 3 for tonight's message, where we're going to learn about 3 guys who were definitely brave enough to obey. In Daniel 3, we learn about a king named Nebuchadnezzar, and Nebuchadnezzar was not necessarily a good guy. He made a decree that all people will bow down to a gold idol he made to represent a false god. And if that wasn't bad enough, he also would punish anybody who didn't bow down to the idol by throwing them into a blazing furnace to be burned to death. Like I said, he wasn't a great guy. Well, there we see 3 guys named Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego who were refusing to bow down to the idol. So these 3 guys are brought before King Nebuchadnezzar, and he gives them one more chance to bow down to his idol. He even tells them that if they don't do it, they will be tied up and thrown into the furnace to be burned. But these 3 say, if you want to throw us in the furnace, that's fine. Our God will protect us. But even if He doesn't, we will never bow down to worship your idols. So of course Nebuchadnezzar goes into this rage and orders these 3 men to be tied up and thrown into the fire. And so the guards tie them up and throw them into the furnace. And just when Nebuchadnezzar thinks he's won, check out verses 24 and 25. But suddenly, Nebuchadnezzar jumped in amazement and exclaimed to his advisors, "Didn't we tie up 3 men and throw them into the furnace?" "Yes, your majesty, we certainly did," they replied. "Look," Nebuchadnezzar shouted, "I see 4 men, unbound, walking around in the fire unharmed, and the 4th looks like a god." So when Nebuchadnezzar sees this, he freaks out and orders for the men to come out into the furnace. The 3 of them come out, and not a single hair on their head was singed, and not a single piece of cloth was scorched. From seeing all this unfold in front of him, Nebuchadnezzar does a complete 180 and even goes as far as to say, "Praise the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego." You see, I'm telling you this because I believe there are 3 truths we can find in this story that relate to us today. We live in a world today that is broken, and we worship a God who is perfect. And it seems so often we are choosing one over the other. And it leads us into the truth number 1, which is our world might not line up with obeying God. In Daniel 3, we see an instance where their society doesn't quite match up with obeying God. Pretty soon, I'm going to ask you to pause the video and discuss with others what is an instance in today's world where our society doesn't quite match up with obeying God. But before we do that, let's look at this instance here in Daniel 3. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego have a choice to make. They can either bow down to the idol and obey King Nebuchadnezzar, or they could obey God. And for me, I think it would just be easier just to obey Nebuchadnezzar, but instead they take a stand and obey God. So back to the question about today. I know there are a lot of places where we can find obeying the world doesn't quite match up with obeying God. Maybe it would be easier to be dishonest and cheat on the test. Maybe it would be easier to not care about what our parents say, even though Scripture tells us to honor our father and mother. Or maybe we want to go through life living however we want when we know that God has called us to so much more. Whatever it is, take this time to pause the video and discuss with your family or friends about an example you see today in society that doesn't quite match up with obeying God. Once you're done, go ahead and press play and the video will continue. So truth 1 was that our world might not line up with obeying God. But the reality is that we all go through tough times where it becomes hard to obey God. For Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, they were going to be thrown into a blazing furnace to be burned to death. Now, I don't know about you, but it would be hard for me not to bow down to the idol in order just to live. But Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego were faithful to God during the hard times. And the best part about it was that God was with them while they were in the furnace. The reality is today, we may not be facing a burning furnace, but we all go through hard times and make it hard to obey God. But my second truth today is that God is with us through those tough times. Maybe it's hard to obey God because Christians have treated you poorly in the past. Maybe your home life isn't great and you wonder why God has placed you in this house with this family. Or maybe it's been a hard time of obeying God since a member of your family suddenly passed away. The truth is we all go through tough times, but the beautiful thing is that God is right by your side, wanting to have a relationship with you. He wants to show you who He created you to be. Since He is right by our side, the only thing we have to do is reach out to Him. He wants you to reach out. But honestly, there may be some of you out there who don't even know what it looks like to reach out to God. And if that's you tonight, reach out to your small group leader, your youth pastor, or you can even email me at ryan@ransom.church, and we would all love to help you see what that looks like. So truth number 1 was that the world might not line up with obeying God. The second truth is that God is with us through the tough times. But have you ever thought about what happens when we do obey God? Do you guys remember Nebuchadnezzar's reaction to Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego when they were obedient? He was amazed, and it inspired him to obey God as well. This leads me to my third and final truth, which is that our obedience inspires other people. So who can you inspire today? I'm going to have to pause the video again here in a little bit. I want you to think of one person you want to inspire. And I want you to think how you can reach out to them this week. For some of you, it may be your best friend. Maybe it's your sibling. Maybe it's even your parents. So go ahead and pause the video and discuss with those around you, who do I want to reach out to inspire and follow God? And how can I reach out to them this week? Thank you guys so much for joining us tonight. We hope you're all staying safe and you have an amazing week. Be sure to follow whatever youth group you go to on their Instagram page or the YouTube channel to get whatever content that you can get. And if you don't have a youth group, you're more than welcome to join the Ransom Teens Instagram page and the Ransom Teens YouTube channel. Love you all, stay safe, and we'll see you next week.